This is the most realistic wilderness survival I've seen. 10 people were dropped off in Labrador, Canada, including both survival experts and novices. The last person standing wins $500,000. Let's see how this season's contestants perform. The first contestant, Carla, is a primitive skills coach who lives a self-sufficient life in a yurt. Whether it's making fire, cooking, or treating illnesses, she relies on herself. She joined the competition to win prize money to build a wilderness survival skills school, fulfilling her long-held dream. Upon landing, Carl saw dark clouds approaching and quickly set up a temporary shelter. While looking for a suitable campsite, she collected dry grass for tinder. The wind picked up, and she hurriedly set up her tarp. She regretted it the next day as the black flies were fierce, leaving bites all over her chest. Carl packed up to move. Open spaces and overly dense forests were unsuitable. She followed an animal trail in the grass, which led to a clearing where she spotted a grouse. Her first arrow missed, but she pursued and caught it with a second shot. By the second day, she had meat to eat, easing her nerves and boosting her confidence. She felt capable of winning as she savored the simple grouse meat. Another contestant, Benji, a hunting guide skilled in making traps and fire by friction, has over 30 years of experience with traditional archery. He believed he could take down a black bear in Labrador. He came to break Roland's record of surviving 100 days. His starting point was near a river suitable for fishing but not for setting up camp. As storm clouds approached, he entered the forest to find a campsite and kept an eye on available resources like berries. While picking berries, he heard a squirrel and expertly shot it down. Before he could set up his tent, heavy rain began to fall. Luckily, one of his 10 chosen items was a raincoat, preventing a cold that could force him to withdraw. After the rain, Benji made a fishing rod with a 10-meter-long cord. By the 4th day, he noticed many small fish trapped in the river at low tide. Local laws only allowed fishing with rods and nets. Otherwise, he would have made a net to catch more efficiently. Using the simplest rod, Benji effortlessly caught 12 small fish, compensating for their size with quantity. Returned to camp to use a pot lid as a griddle. Fry the trout until cooked. Among the 10 items Benji chose, there is Himalayan rock salt. He believes that consuming enough salt is as important as having sufficient food. The cooked fish tastes like salty popcorn, sizzling with a golden brown color. The flavor should be decent. Contestant Jessie is also a survival coach, mastering various skills. She currently runs an outdoor survival school for women. Money is not an issue for her. She joined the competition to test herself. She too began by scouting in the woods, looking for resources and a campsite. Passing by a quiet stream, she saw fresh bear tracks on the bank. Jessie did not want to be woken by that bear in the middle of the night, so she found a distant spot to secure her tarp. She just needed to pile up some branches underneath. However, the inevitable happened. That night, she heard a bear roaring outside the camp, estimating it to be within 50 meters. Jessie was not very scared, but rather pitied the bear, which might become a victim of her arrows. The 4th contestant, Juan, grew up in the forest, chasing rabbits and trapping snakes. Recently, he underwent a solo survival challenge to prepare for this competition. He wants the $500,000 prize to buy land and build a house for his girlfriend. While searching for a campsite, he also found fresh bear droppings. Juan could hardly hide his smile, seeing it as a ticket to victory. He planned to hunt a bear and eat it for a month, by which time he might be close to winning. After finding a campsite, he did not want to spend much effort on the shelter. He just made a frame with logs, secured the tarp, and sealed the ends with branches for a permanent shelter. Before the competition, he drank milk and ate olive oil daily, gaining 60 pounds, thinking if he couldn't get a bear, he could survive on his fat reserves for a month. Juan heard squirrels chattering in the woods. When he approached, the squirrels, sensing danger, disappeared. Returning to camp, he pushed aside some saplings and found a pile of discarded tin cans. The rules allow contestants to use anything they find. Juan assembled a few cans into a bacon stove. Then he took out the fireproof material from his leggings, sewed it onto the cut-open tarp, and extended the bacon without worrying about burning the tarp. Juan also gathered a lot of clay to seal the outside of the stove. He was busy until evening before everything was done. Jacques is the youngest contestant this season, a glacier guide who often encounters bears and was even attacked by a grizzly. He became interested in jungle survival skills at age 11. Now, whether building shelters or hunting and fishing, he is very skilled. He currently lives in an RV with his girlfriend and joined the competition to win the prize money to buy a decent house. Jacques' luck is incredible. While patrolling the woods, he found an old animal trap but wasn't sure if it still worked. On the fourth day, before he even got dressed, he spotted a squirrel outside his camp while his stomach was growling. He shot an arrow at the squirrel, killing it instantly. As he went to retrieve his prey, he turned and saw a grouse in a tree. His luck was unstoppable as he shot the grouse down too. While others might spend hours in the woods without catching anything, Jacques had prey delivered right to his doorstep. Enjoying squirrel and grouse stew made his days delightful, which would surely make other contestants envious. The sixth contestant, Igor, spent 4 days looking for a campsite but ended up right where he started. With Armenian, Egyptian, French, and Russian heritage, Igor learned archery as a child and once hunted a half-ton muskox. He joined the competition to test his skills and improve his family's life with the prize money. Affected by the tides of Labrador, the river near his area had lots of seaweed hanging on the branches. Igor gathered some to cook, and although he hadn't found protein yet, the seaweed would stave off hunger for a few days. As the first Asian contestant to live alone in the wilderness, Temujin served 6 years in the military, specializing in cold weather warfare and survival. After his service, he became a general practitioner. Confident in his willpower, he joined the competition to pay off his student loans and renovate his home. Temujin had his own ideas about building a permanent shelter. He started by constructing a frame with canvas and logs, then dug a fire pit. Knowing the design needed for a warm shelter, he made sure the pit was at least half a meter deep and divided into 3 parts for the smoke inlet, smoke outlet, and furnace. He then found some river mud, squeezed out the air by pounding it, and smoothed it over the fire pit. After lighting a fire inside to harden the mud, all that was left was to refine the shelter for the winter. Contestant Terry, a commercial fisherman, was drawn by the wilderness of Alaska. Working only 4 months a year, he spent the rest in nature. He joined the competition to see how far he could go. Terry had set up a temporary camp but had not yet started a fire. He collected tinder yesterday but unfortunately left it outside where it got wet from the rain. With over 100 rainy days a year in Labrador, finding dry tinder in the woods was challenging. Terry chopped open a tree trunk and carved out a few wood pieces. After struggling with a flint, he finally started a fire. A few sips of hot tea made him feel much better. It was time to build a long-term shelter. What he thought would be a massive project turned out to be just sawing a few small trees and creating an inverted V structure covered with a tarp. Simplicity at its finest. After finishing, he went fishing in the river with his rod and soon caught a trout, a perfect size for a meal to replenish the energy spent building the camp. Tom is a farmer owning over 300 acres of land, influenced by his father's profession. Each summer, he had the chance to encounter various wild animals in Africa, learning hunting and tracking skills. He felt his observational skills were superior to other contestants. These days, he survived on berries, which he grew tired of, and now sought protein in the forest. However, the dense vegetation made moving around not as easy as he imagined. In a new area, hearing many squirrels around, he drew his bow and shot one in the heart. Although he apologized to the squirrel, his processing speed was quick. He started by eating the squirrel's head, not liking it much but knowing it contained heart-healthy fatty acids. The meat satisfied his body's need for protein and fats. Finally, Adam, a treehouse carpenter with superior hands-on skills compared to other contestants, had also sailed across the Pacific Ocean in 90 days, showing his courage and capacity to endure solitude. Hunting and fishing had always been his passions. He joined the contest to win the prize money to improve his family's life. Adam planned to build an improved lean-to cabin at a chosen spot. He first constructed a frame with logs, then layered the roof covered with a tarp with spruce branches like tiling. The sides were secured with wood pressing against moss, enhancing waterproofing and insulation. He reserved a space for a door and a window, completing his permanent shelter. After finishing, he needed to hunt for food. Searching the woods, he only found fresh bear droppings, which he was glad to see, as killing a black bear could shift his situation from food scarcity to surplus. After some time, he reached a clearing at the mountain summit. Just as Adam was about to reflect, He saw a grouse fly into a nearby forest and chased after it with an arrow. Unfortunately, he aimed a few centimeters too low, and the arrow disappeared. While searching, he encountered the same fleeing grouse. Despite worrying about missing and losing another arrow, his hunger got the best of him. He drew his bow and aimed all in one go, but missed again. Both arrows fell into a thick layer of moss, making them likely hard to retrieve. Since Adam failed to catch the grouse, he decided to try fishing instead. He found a straight tree trunk, stripped off the bark to use as a fishing rod, and cut an eyelet from his tarp to secure the auxiliary line. After casting his line, he quickly hooked a trout. His luck and resources were outstanding. Over the next few hours, he consistently caught fish, overcoming his earlier misfortune with hunting grouse. He caught over a dozen trout, happily showing his catch to the camera. 10 smaller fish were cooked in a pot, while the largest one was smoked for preservation. That evening, Adam had a very satisfying meal. Tom wanted to make a decorative streamer for his fish hook. When he learned that the competition only allowed fly fishing rods and nets, he dyed a bright green feather, cut it in front of the camera, and tied it next to the hook with pink nylon rope. When it came time to test his creation, the fly did not disappoint. In just 50 minutes, he caught 3 trout, totaling over a kilogram. He felt hopeful about winning the $500,000 prize. Jacques was undoubtedly the luckiest contestant so far. Like the others, he also fished, but the fish he caught were significantly larger, resembling Arctic chars with robust, brightly colored bodies. Jacques quickly gutted the fish by the river, brought it back to camp, and cooked it over a fire. In just a few minutes, it was ready to eat, very fatty and rich in protein and fat. He was very satisfied with his achievements in hunting and fishing, and his shelter was well built. His only trouble was missing his girlfriend. By day 12, Jacques noticed his body fat reducing rapidly, even though he had the best diet among the contestants, with his weight dropping 10% since the start. As rain seemed imminent, Jacques began splitting wood. During a break, he saw a squirrel in a tree and shot it with precise archery, proving his skill. However, as he waited for the meat to stew, he couldn't smile. He disliked killing animals, which deeply saddened him. Over the next few days, he reflected on his interactions with wildlife, realizing they were all harmful. Combined with missing his girlfriend, he felt staying longer would mean missing out on better moments. Thus, on the morning of the 15th day, he called to withdraw from the competition. He had the best diet and luck, but was the first to leave, showing that youth might not fully appreciate the value of money. Hopefully, Jacques won't regret his decision later. Following his departure, 9 contestants remained. Benji felt the weather was getting colder and decided to build a permanent shelter. He found a flat area near the water, used existing trees as support posts, and tied several logs horizontally to form the main frame. The roof was completed by covering it with a tarp. The rest would be done gradually. Just as Benji lay down to rest, he heard the sound of a squirrel nearby. After locating it, he unhesitatingly drew his bow and shot an arrow. His aim was unmatched. Benji fried the squirrel in a pan, noting while eating that he felt more vibrant here than in his comfortable home life, with no thoughts of quitting. His fishing luck was also excellent, catching 3 fish in a few hours by the river. While others struggled to find meat, he had an excess. Benji used stones to enclose a small area of water to store his food for the next day. He preferred hunting over fishing. Passing through a marsh, he noticed many beaver trails and decided to try an ambush. While looking for a good spot, he saw a beaver in the water ahead and immediately shot an arrow. The arrow grazed the beaver's scalp, but it did not escape far. After struggling in the water and escaping out of sight, Benji searched the area, hoping not to lose the beaver. Unable to find it, he speculated it might have swum to the main river, but saw no body there. He hoped to find the injured beaver the next morning. Though Adam had built a permanent shelter early, the smoke ventilation was poor. He needed to make a fireplace. Lacking suitable rocks, he dug up mud, added chopped weeds and water, and kneaded it to increase plasticity. Using thin tree trunks as main beams and interlacing willow branches, he plastered the mud to form walls. While Adam worked methodically, he heard a noise outside. A grouse perched on a tree branch caused the sound. Having lost arrows while hunting grouse before, Adam feared using his bow again and risked being defenseless against a bear, so he threw a stick, but missed wildly. Adam was too conservative. Without using the bow, catching prey was unlikely. Fortunately, The fireplace was progressing well. The fire dried the mud walls without cracking, and the smoke ventilation improved. After successful fishing, Adam hoped for more success, cut a small piece of his shoe insole, tied it with colored thread to make a fake fly, and cast his line by the river. Expecting bites like before, he was disappointed with no action after hours of effort. Further attempts also ended fruitlessly. Adam thought the river water might be getting colder, which is why the fish weren't biting. He suspected he had fished out the nearby areas. Shifting his focus to hunting due to his deteriorating archery skills, Adam practiced shooting arrows every morning. Today he planned to hunt a black bear, which was active and fat before hibernation. If successful, it would secure his food supply for a long time. On his way, Adam found a large, yellow porcini mushroom, perfect for a soup side dish. After searching the woods for 3 hours without spotting a bear, he encountered a grouse, his old nemesis. This time, Adam didn't miss, and took down the grouse with one shot, making his efforts worthwhile. Back at the shelter, he stuffed the grouse with cranberries and sliced porcini, then cooked it in a pot with water for 20 minutes. The grouse was coated with a thick sauce, and the flavors of the cranberries and porcini permeated the meat, rewarding his palate with each bite. Sitting by the fire and enjoying his meal epitomized his ideal wilderness life. Turning to Jessie, who faced windy and rainy weather in Labrador, she felt insecure under just a tarp, and began building a permanent shelter on a hillside. She fixed logs under trees to outline the walls and leveled the ground by removing part of the slope. The calories needed for such a massive project were enormous, and just foraging for berries wouldn't suffice. In the forest, Jessie saw many squirrels and set wire traps on their active trees. Setting traps saved more energy than hunting with a bow across the hills. She made 15 traps in one go. Just as she sat down to rest, she heard a squirrel and found it had been caught in one of her traps. Surprised by the quick catch, she cleaned the squirrel by the river and stewed it until tender, devouring it as her body had long craved protein. Later, she installed more logs in her shelter, creating a complex structure. Due to the sheer amount of wood needed, Jessie used readily available bark and moss for the walls. Even so, the calorie expenditure was high. Her only source of meat was the wire traps. The next day, another squirrel was caught, but as Jessie approached to retrieve it, a poignant scene unfolded. A companion squirrel came down from a tree, pushed the dead body, and made noises trying to wake it. It lingered sadly before finally leaving. Jessie stood by and witnessed the whole process. Others might have been moved to quit, but Jessie is a survival instructor. Although it made her very sad, she knew this was nature's law of survival, with killing being an inevitable part. Igor cooked another pot of seaweed. These days, he survived on seaweed alone, not catching any fish or hitting any game with his bow. He lost 17 pounds. Without the seaweed, he probably wouldn't have lasted. He planned to build a cabin as a permanent home, choosing a damp location near a water source. Igor intended to lay a log floor in the shelter, choosing logs that weighed 100 pounds each. To prevent future fires, he also planned to strip off the bark, which took about 30 minutes per log. With no solid food supply, the construction of the cabin was far from fast. He was busy until dusk, only managing to complete the base and half of the floor. Igor stared at the camera, pondering how to survive the days ahead, when he saw a grouse land nearby. He quietly approached with his saw and surprisingly killed the grouse with it. The food came so unexpectedly. That evening, Igor roasted the grouse. Its meat was lean, slightly greasy, and not fatty. His hungry stomach finally felt somewhat full, giving him strength for tomorrow's construction. Juan also saw a squirrel from his doorstep but wasn't as lucky as Igor. His arrow missed. He hadn't caught any fish from the river these days and had only eaten one grouse so far. Juan patrolled the woods, hoping to find rabbit traces to set traps, but only saw black bear footprints. Judging from the size of the prints, the bear must have weighed nearly 400 pounds. Juan had long wanted to hunt a bear for his food reserve. Instead of blindly searching, he preferred to wait for prey. He hung the grouse's innards and food scraps in a tin can in midair, waiting for a black bear to come sniffing around so he could shoot it from hiding. He thought the championship was as good as his. Carla hadn't washed her hair in half a month. It was dry and coarse. Today, she specially boiled water. After cleaning her hair, she would continue building her shelter. Carla designed a conical structure, using a digging stick to organize the living space on the ground. She installed several more wooden supports on both sides for stability and tied on the tarp to complete half of the shelter. At night, she lit a fire inside and felt very satisfied with her creation. 17 days into the competition, 9 contestants remained. Benji hit a beaver yesterday. This morning, before dawn, he went to where it was last seen and started searching along the main river. When he saw a clear trail in the bushes, Benji walked over and found the beaver, now completely cold. He estimated the beaver to be around 50 pounds, with each pound of beaver meat averaging 960 calories, a significant gain. Benji does not want to attract the black bear to the camp. After cleaning the beaver innards in the swamp, he finishes the disassembly in the nearby woods. He removes as much fat as possible from the entire beaver and cuts the lean meat into strips. Then he makes a smoking rack, encloses it on 3 sides with branches to lock in the smoke, and places the meat on it for dehydration and antibacterial purposes. Benji believes that if he allocates the portions properly, it should last him a month. Relying solely on this beaver is not enough to ensure victory. Only a black bear would make victory almost certain. Before the competition, he had expressed his desire to surpass Roland's record of surviving 100 days. Roland's black bear hunt had been a topic of long-standing joy among his fans. Benji wants to hunt a black bear to prove his own strength. That evening, Benji fries some minced meat with a pot lid. The taste, resembling the juicy fat of a ribeye steak, exceeds his expectations. The next afternoon, Benji uses the pile of beaver innards as bait and installs a camera nearby to see if it attracts a black bear so he can plan the hunt. By night, Benji is still obsessed with the black bear, thinking about hunting it, eating its meat. Excitingly, a black bear does smell the scent and approaches. What happens next will depend on Benji's actions. Temujin has been continuously improving his shelter and has finally completed it. His energy levels are at a new low, making hunting and foraging a top priority. He notices many squirrel holes in the woods and the ground littered with their gnawed pine cones. Temujin uses these pine cones as bait, setting a spring-loaded rod trap outside the holes. If a squirrel sticks its head in, breaking the inverted balance, it will be caught by the wire. While waiting for the trap to work, he boils the berries he collected into a tea, which tastes fragrantly sweet and sour. Sitting in his shelter, then prepares firewood for the night. Happiness comes unexpectedly when, after chopping enough wood, he hears the sound of a partridge flapping its wings nearby. Looking over, he sees it on a tree just a dozen meters away. Temujin immediately retrieves his bow and arrows from the camp, returns, and hits the partridge with one shot. The injured partridge hangs in the tree, reluctant to come down. Temujin uses a stick to dislodge it, physically overcoming it and showcasing it on camera. He takes it to the river, cleans it, and prepares it on a fire. After eating wild vegetables and berries for several days, he is especially grateful for this barbecue. The moment the meat enters his mouth, he feels completely comfortable. Temujin knows there's another partridge in that area and can now recognize its sounds. With his superb archery skills, he expects the coming days to be better. Let's check on Tom and see how his shelter is doing. Today, he just used some sticks to build a low wall and then went out with his bow and arrows to find food. As he passed through a thicket, he saw a gray crow ahead. Tom shot an arrow without hesitation, and the crow died instantly without knowing what happened. He didn't rush back to start cooking as the small amount of food would barely fill him up. Tom went to the river, plucked a feather from the gray crow to use as a fake fly, and tried to catch a larger trout. He didn't know how long he would have to stand as punishment. Suddenly, he felt a tug on the fishing line. Tom quickly pulled towards the shore. Judging by the splashes, the fish was no less than half a pound. Now Tom could go home for a full meal. The fresh trout was grilled for lunch. He saved the cut-off fish head to make soup with the gray crow in the evening. While waiting for the fish to cook, he laid some pine branches on the ground to serve as a plate. The ritual felt completely satisfying. The cooked fish was tender and juicy. Tom greedily ate bite by bite, and soon only the fish bones were left. Life was exceptionally pleasant compared to Igor's. Igor had spent all his energy building his shelter. Except for catching a partridge on the day he broke ground, he was now trying to fish. Local regulations only allowed fishing with fly rods and nets, neither of which Igor was skilled at. After a long time with no bites, he saw a seal pop up in the water. With seals around, any fish would either be eaten or scared away. Igor moved to another spot but still caught nothing. However, the trip wasn't entirely fruitless as he found a mussel. Igor couldn't wait to start a fire and cooked the mussel in a pile of seaweed. After a week without meat, he tasted the mussel repeatedly before reluctantly throwing away the shell. The next day, Igor ground some charcoal and used his fingers instead of the toothbrush provided by the show. After brushing thoroughly and swallowing it with mouthwash as a morning tea, he believed eating charcoal was good for the stomach. However, given his current state of working hard without proper meals, his stomach wasn't likely doing well. Moreover, building a shelter with sawn wood was exhausting. The discrepancy between his intake and expenditure seemed to be affecting his health. Igor felt his heart beating faster and worried about causing permanent damage to his body. After much internal struggle, he finally chose to call and withdraw from the competition. Terry also suffered greatly. He hadn't had a bowel movement in 12 days and was experiencing dangerous symptoms like dizziness and nausea. That afternoon, he even suffered muscle spasms, stomach cramps, and leg cramps due to malnutrition. Terry hoped to endure a bit longer to see if he could overcome this. Fortunately, after a loud relief, Terry finally managed a bowel movement, feeling completely rejuvenated. All discomfort vanished immediately. The next morning at 5:30 a.m., Terry got up early to head to the riverbank, where beavers were often spotted. He had been observing this spot before dawn for the past 7 to 8 days, waiting for the right moment to use his bow and arrows for food storage. Today, he finally got his chance when an unsuspecting beaver swam within range. An arrow flew across the top left of the screen, followed by splashes in the water. Terry watched from the shore as the injured beaver floated motionless in the middle of the river. After 40 minutes, he confirmed its death. Terry stripped down to his underwear and entered the water, which was shallow enough to walk through and retrieve the beaver. The close-up shot showed the beaver was as heavy as the one Benji had caught. After getting back on shore and dressing quickly, what seemed like a near withdrawal from the competition turned around within a day or two, showcasing the charm of living alone in the wilderness. After 21 days, 8 contestants remained. Benji, after checking a camera placed next to the beaver's entrails, found a black bear had come to eat, attracted by the smell. Although he planned to use the bear as a long-term food source, the current high temperature risked spoiling the meat before he could smoke it. So, he decided to wait another half-month until the temperature dropped below freezing. Now living in a large shelter that required much effort to maintain, Benji decided to build a new one, similar to a yurt. He would use 3 logs tied at the top to form a tripod, fix each side with acorns, wrap it with canvas, and fill the gaps with branches. Benji also had an urgent task. He needed to sharpen his axe in his new shelter, adhering to the principle that a sharp axe makes chopping easier. After setting up a temporary workbench, he cleaned the beaver skin, which would otherwise go to waste. He removed the fat cleanly, which was substantial enough to render nearly half a pot of oil, providing at least 15,000 calories. At 4:30 p.m., a grouse suddenly entered the camp. Despite already having beaver meat, Benji knew there was no such thing as too much food in the wilderness. He grabbed his bow and arrow and shot at it. The bad news was he missed, but the good news was the grouse didn't fly far. He followed and shot another arrow, hitting it perfectly this time. While other contestants were starving, Benji's food supply was almost overflowing. As long as nothing unexpected happened, reaching the top 3 seemed likely. In the evening, he fried the grouse meat in beaver fat, and the taste was indescribably delicious, bursting with flavor in his mouth. Meanwhile, Jessie had been building a jungle cabin for weeks and still had much to finish. Spotting a grouse nearby, she shot an arrow, but it veered off, embedding in the cabin's frame. In contrast, Adam's archery skills were much better. After daily morning practice, he could now headshot squirrels. Preparing to head home, he spotted another nearby and shot again, significantly improving his accuracy. Today's hunting was fruitful. Juan was the most energy-efficient contestant, even drinking raw water to save time and effort. As a Mexican, his stomach handled it well, having done so for 10 years. Recently, he hadn't eaten much, finding no animal traces in the woods and considering fishing at the river, suspecting the fish had moved to warmer, deeper waters. He started building a dock by tying a beam between 2 tripods and extending wood into the water, allowing him to finish the dock from the shore. Suddenly, a seal appeared on the river, likely scaring off nearby fish. After it left, Juan stood on the dock, casting his line, and soon his luck turned. Bait wasn't in the water long before a fish bit. Though not large, he consistently caught more. totaling 6 trout in 2 hours. A great haul. Juan quickly made a fire, cooked a full pot with berries, planning to eat 3 trout today and 3 tomorrow, replenishing his protein and fat. Switching to Tom. His shelter was nearly complete. With some free time, he made several traps. Like Jesse, he chose a location against a mountain 6 days ago. Using a digging stick, he leveled a large area, drove several stakes into the ground, and secured the main framework with beams and footlocks. He constructed low walls with thin branches and planned to fill the upper part with leaves later. Collecting stones and clay from a creek, he built a fireplace in a corner by alternating layers of stone and clay and finally covered the entire cabin with a tarp. After completing such a large project, it's definitely time to eat. Tom was checking the traps he had set up in the forest. The first 2 were untouched, and he thought there was no hope left. A snowshoe hare providing over 800 calories and 18 grams of fat, the first rabbit caught this season. He processed it inside his shelter and couldn't wait to cook the rabbit meat, adding berries and roots for flavor before serving. The tender, aromatic meat was delicious. Carl's shelter was still rudimentary, and she wanted to improve it for the coming cold weather. However, food was scarce. She had to find something substantial to fill her stomach. With her bow and arrow, she ventured into the densely branched woods, making hunting difficult. Fortunately, she spotted a squirrel on the ground. Carly shot an arrow, humorously unsure if she had hit her target. After pushing through the branches, she ended up disappointed. Since hunting was unsuccessful, she tried fishing. Concerned about returning empty-handed again, Carla chose the calmest part of the water. A fish bit within minutes, but due to her haste, it slipped off the hook. She continued waiting by the river and soon caught a trout, which was substantial enough to rival Juan's 6 fish, providing about 800 calories and 100 grams of protein. Carly cleaned the fish and cooked it right away. The white, tender meat was especially tempting, rich in oil and flavor, which she believed would help her complete part of her shelter. Turning to Adam, his stomach started hurting last night. He didn't know if it was a parasite infection or just discomfort due to his diet. Adam hoped to feel better by morning, but by 10 p.m. his condition had worsened. He said if it was parasites, he would just have to endure as long as he could. Benji experienced similar symptoms, waking up with stomach pain this morning. He found some herbs on the riverbank known to treat stomach issues, hoping they would help. He decided to do nothing today but lie in the sun by the river. Adam also attempted self-treatment using birch bark, which is said to soothe the stomach when boiled in water. Unsure of the dosage, he randomly prepared some to drink and felt much better after resting. He then boiled water to wash his face, finally feeling relief from the discomfort. Benji's situation was not optimistic. By evening, he developed a fever. He suspected he had contracted a parasite from handling raw meat without proper hand hygiene. That night, Benji suffered from vomiting and diarrhea, quickly depleting his energy. By dawn, his mental resolve completely collapsed. Despite having plenty of food reserves, he was too sick to continue. Reluctantly, Benji chose to withdraw from the competition. On the 28th day of the competition, 7 contestants are still persevering. A few days ago, Terry killed a beaver. He built a miniature storage shed from logs and stored the beaver meat. For breakfast today, he had a clear stew made from the beaver's head, gnawing it thoroughly to extract every bit of meat from the bone crevices, aiming to consume every calorie. After eating, he had work to do. His most pressing task was to smoke and dehydrate the meat before it spoiled. Terry calmly sliced the beaver meat into strips, prepared hanging trays from wire and branches, and transformed his previously constructed storage shed into a smokehouse by lighting a fire at the base. After 20 hours of waiting, he lifted the top log with great expectation and was greeted by a delightful aroma. The beaver meat was smoked perfectly. To ensure dryness, he chopped the leftover meat to prepare for further smoking. The bone meat, rich in fat and connective tissues, was unsuitable for smoking, so he fried it until well done. The taste of the fried meat, humming with satisfaction, along with the boiled leftover fat and water, was excellent, leaving Terry immensely satisfied. Tom, undoubtedly a good man, didn't forget to make a small gift for his wife, even while participating in the Wilderness Survival Challenge. He crafted a pair of earrings from steel wire. With limited time in the morning, he had to leave to check his traps. Tom hoped for a snowshoe hare like last time, but after inspecting all traps without any catch, he found beaver tracks leading to a water dam. Knowing beavers are typically nocturnal and hardly appear during the day, he ventured out at 6:30 a.m. the next morning, just before dawn, with his bow and arrows to stake out near the beaver dam. Nearly 2 hours passed as daylight broke, and finally a beaver appeared. Tom took his shot, and the beaver, hit by the arrow, dove underwater and quickly vanished. He waited a few minutes to see if the body would surface, but saw nothing on the water. The retrieved arrow lacked even a single beaver hair, making Tom doubt whether he hit it or if the injured beaver had escaped back to its den. If that was the case, finding the body would be impossible, and his efforts would have been in vain, possibly alerting the prey. He planned to let the area settle for a few days before returning to hunt. In Temujin's shelter, a few mice had moved in, likely attracted by his cooking every time he lit a fire. Temujin decided to make several Paiute traps, specialized for small animals. He set them up at his doorstep with berries tied to the trigger stick, so any entering mouse would be crushed by a falling stone. Temujin had just finished setting his traps when he heard a grouse flapping nearby. Following the sound, he spotted the grouse on the ground and shot an arrow at it. Unfortunately, he missed by a few centimeters. The grouse flew to a tree about 10 meters away. Temujin followed and shot another arrow, but missed again. The arrow shot into the sky and disappeared. Following its trajectory, he found the arrow in a tree not far from his shelter. He tried to knock it down with a stick, but ended up having to climb the nearly 6-meter-high tree, a somewhat risky task. Falling could mean injury or worse. That evening, Temujin comforted himself in his shelter and built a mental defense. Only 2 days had passed, and his luck had completely turned around. At 2:30 p.m., he shot a grouse, thankfully capturing the beautiful bird. Not far from there, he heard another grouse and took another successful shot. 2 grouse in 1 day, more than he expected. On his way to the river, he spotted another grouse and hit it with 1 shot. With several pounds of meat, it was necessary to build a smokehouse to preserve it. To avoid attracting black bears to the camp, he processed the grouse by the river. He cut down a tree as thick as a thigh, removed excess branches, and used it as a crossbeam on a slope. He dug a fire pit underneath and piled branches on either side for cover. Temujin was ready to face any black bears attracted by the smell. The smoking temperature was just right, and the grouse meat on top did not drip grease, minimizing calorie loss. The remaining grouse skin and innards were his dinner for the day. Turning to the female contestant, Jessie, after a month, her shelter was still unfinished. Fortunately, the outline and frame were ready, and now she only needed to finish the walls and roof. This morning, Jessie saw snow on the opposite mountain ridge, signaling the approaching winter. It was time to finish the shelter and focus on gathering food. She stuffed collected rotten wood between 2 rows of stakes, stacking them to form a wall. After expending countless calories, Jessie's shelter was barely complete. She wanted to celebrate with a few fish, but the fish had moved to deeper waters. Jessie caught nothing. The wire traps she had set in the forest hadn't caught anything for 5 days. Tonight, she would go to sleep hungry, unavoidably feeling a bit sad. Juan caught 6 trout a few days ago. Today, only a few heads and half a bowl of aspic remain, valuable sources of fat. Tasting the success of fishing, he wanted to continue. However, his fishing rod had cracked. Not wanting to carve a new one, simply tied the crack with a rope and eagerly cast his line again. It seemed he had used up all his fishing luck last time, as he waited on the pier for a long time without a bite. Realizing it was pointless to wait, he planned to go hunting instead. After an unfruitful search in the woods, he returned to camp and surprisingly found a grouse in a tree. The grouse was high up, making it difficult to hit. Juan did not rush his shot and moved closer to shoot a blunt arrow. The grouse struggled vigorously after being hit, managing to shake off the arrow and escape unnoticed. Juan knew it would be nearly impossible to find it again as he looked around the similar terrain. He returned to the lakeside, somewhat disheartened. Yet, sometimes things work out unexpectedly. 3 days later, while hunting in the bushes, Juan encountered the injured grouse again, now cold and partially eaten by other animals. Back at camp, he carelessly dropped the grouse on the ground, attracting a white weasel by its scent. He shooed it away, but the weasel did not go far, lingering in the nearby bushes. Juan shot an arrow at it casually and surprisingly hit it. The weasel's meat was barely enough for a snack, but its fur was valuable. He planned to skin it carefully to gift to his girlfriend. After 34 days, 7 contestants were still enduring. Terry had been eating beaver meat for several days and, oddly, was still losing weight. Today, desperate, he scraped the last bits of fat from a preserved beaver skin, hoping to use the rendered oil to regain some weight, even considering drinking it if necessary. The oil residue became his snack. Jessie was still struggling with her shelter. After last night's heavy rain, Jessie's tarp had collected much water. She started using moss to fill the gaps in her walls. The entire wall, over 3 meters long, was gradually filled with moss. Today, her trap finally caught a squirrel. Although a fox had bitten off a part of it, she wouldn't have to go to sleep on an empty stomach drinking just water. Meanwhile, Adam was splitting wood in his front yard when a grouse flew by. Presented with such an opportunity, he took his bow and arrow and shot it. After plucking and gutting the grouses by the river, Adam headed back to camp, but was suddenly captivated by something in the bushes, exclaiming in surprise. He initially thought it might be food, but discovered it was actually a floating dock. Coming from a carpentry background, Adam had many ideas about how to utilize the pile of wood. He took the planks and nails back, first making a bench for resting, then a door. He positioned the remaining planks, sawed off the excess, and nailed them in place. Adam felt that a sturdy door was crucial to prevent black bears from entering his shelter, and also made it feel more like home. Tom disliked the dim light in his shelter, and saw the need for a more efficient lamp. He fixed a white reflector at the top of a branch and shone his headlamp on it, which significantly improved the light. Despite these improvements, parts of his shelter still needed work. Since the start of the challenge, Tom had caught 15 squirrels, 19 trout, 5 grouses, 1 snowshoe hare, and 1 gray noise duck. Although it seemed a lot, it was just enough to scrape by. He had already lost 88 pounds. Hunting daily, Tom was alert at the slightest sound of a squirrel, and with his skilled archery, few animals escaped him. Today was no exception. With 1 squirrel already in hand, Tom decided to pick some berries to take back. But then another grouse flew by and landed on the ground to feed. He shot it with an arrow. To preserve the fat on the skin, Tom roasted the squirrel directly over the fire, scraping off the dirt before it was perfectly cooked. To the average person, this might be hard to swallow, but hunger is the best spice, and Tom thoroughly enjoyed his meal, confident he could last a while longer. Unexpectedly, trouble came quickly. Due to the many gray noise crows in the trees near his camp, Tom made a bird trap. The concept was simple. When a gray noise crow landed on a branch, it would lose balance and get caught by a wire loop above. After setting the trap, Tom went hunting as usual but returned with only a bunch of lichens. He caught no animals. When he got back to camp, the bird trap had been triggered, but the wire snare wasn't flexible enough to tighten in time to trap the gray noise crow. 3 days passed, and Tom survived on just lichens and berries, constantly hungry but not delaying the construction of his shelter. Long-term lack of adequate food and clothing can lead to mental distraction and inability to focus. Indeed, while chopping a tree, Tom had an accident, falling onto a sharp tree stump and injuring his back, specifically at the kidney area. He planned to rest for a few days to recover, but without food, even rest was futile. Tom pinned his hopes on catching a beaver. That night, he was in so much pain that he tossed and turned, unable to sleep. Before dawn, he took his bow and arrows and went to the river to keep watch. Unfortunately, the water remained unusually calm from beginning to end. He had to try to stay optimistic, as he could not sit idle. Tom decided to fill his time with small tasks, like finding some clay to seal the gaps in his chimney. However, another mishap occurred. The scarcity of food severely impacted Tom's thinking and judgment abilities and made his body very fragile. This time, he injured his knee, which swelled up considerably. Now, without external supplies and suffering from injuries, Tom felt he no longer had the strength even to chop wood. He had given his all and could go no further, so he made the call to withdraw from the competition. Meanwhile, the female contestant Carl was making jam to save for the winter when food would be scarce. Although she hadn't caught many animals, her shelter was built simply, which inadvertently saved a lot of energy. If she could keep making jam continuously, she might last another few weeks. On the 41st day, which was her mother's birthday, Carla made a cake out of lichens and moss. Despite these, she still hoped to have some real meat to celebrate her mother's birthday in the evening. Perhaps luck was on her side, as her previously unused snare caught a squirrel today. After so many days of eating wild vegetables and berries, she finally got to consume some protein that evening, savoring each bite before reluctantly swallowing. Let's check on Temujin, who goes hunting daily. This morning he was lucky. Just as he stepped out the door, a squirrel appeared as if offering itself up. The first arrow missed, but the oblivious squirrel stayed nearby, successfully shooting the squirrel with his third arrow. Notably, this was the first squirrel he had shot since starting the challenge, as he usually hunted grouse and had even shot 3 in one go a few days earlier. With the jerky he had just finished and now new food, Temujin couldn't help but feel hopeful about winning the $500,000 prize. Since catching a beaver, Terry hadn't gone out to hunt. Now that the meat was gone, he picked up his fishing rod and returned to the river. However, his body was not what it used to be. He often felt thirsty, and standing too long caused him to feel dizzy and faint. He needed to find a place to sit and rest. Additionally, he suffered from stomach pain and nausea. Naturally, his fishing efforts were unsuccessful. On the 42nd day, Terry built a large fire in his shelter, as it was the day for contestants' physical examinations. He wanted to see the state of his health. Despite eating a lot of beaver meat, his body was drastically thin. According to his symptoms, it was clear Terry had contracted parasites from the beaver, and the medical results confirmed this. Given his significantly declined bodily functions, the rules required Terry to withdraw from the competition for medical treatment. Carl, who had been eating the jam she made daily, saw her teeth discolor. She gathered some horsetail grass, which is rich in silica and can help repair tooth enamel. After grinding it into powder and brushing her teeth, they seemed much whiter. Previously unsuccessful in fishing, Carly noticed muskrat activity by the river and decided to hunt them instead. Considering they often swim, she tied her fishing line to her arrow to avoid losing it. Prepared, she waited by the river, dreaming of how she would spend the $500,000 prize if she won. Suddenly, a muskrat's head popped up. Carl took a few seconds to react, and just as she was about to shoot, the muskrat sensed danger and dived underwater. The next day, fully focused, she saw a muskrat swimming towards the shore and quickly shot it in the chest with an arrow. Surprised by her success, Carl immediately cooked the muskrat, which has 95 grams of protein and 730 calories per pound. Having not eaten meat for weeks, this meal renewed her determination. As heavy snow began to fall, signaling the coming winter and scarcer food, the real challenge for the contestants began. Adam, still with a few planks left, prioritized food and warmth for the winter. He planned to use the last planks for his windows, needing to saw and level the uneven wood, secure the frame, and then install the boards. As temperatures dropped, grouse hid deeper in the forest, requiring him to venture into new areas. His efforts paid off when he found a snowshoe hare, a rare catch only previously trapped by Tom. With his skilled archery, Adam killed the hare, which was quite large. That evening, he indulged in rabbit stew, savoring a change from the constant diet of squirrel and grouse, chewing thoroughly to waste nothing. Jessie was certainly unique, finishing her shelter on day 43 of the challenge. Although she had moved in 10 days earlier, the walls were still bare, needing more wood and moss, which kept her busy until now. Jessie's body was nearly at its limit. She had been hiccuping frequently in the past few days and felt waves of nausea. Clearly, eating too little had damaged her stomach. If she couldn't find food soon, her condition would worsen. Jessie crawled into the bush to check the traps she had set, but caught nothing, falling into despair. Temujin, the Asian contestant, lived up to his name. He managed to kill a squirrel with a throwing stick, a feat others couldn't achieve with a bow and arrow. Thanks to the active squirrels and grouse around, Temujin had sustained himself on them for over 40 days. Not far from his camp, he spotted a grouse pecking at the ground, which quickly became his next catch. Juan noticed the fish had moved to deeper waters farther from the shore. He decided to extend the dock by connecting 2 tripods with a beam, pushing them out with a log, and then laying more logs to form a platform. His fishing attempts were successful. He caught 3 trout. Even looking at the cooked fish, Juan couldn't muster the appetite to eat, fearing it would be counterproductive if he vomited. By day 45, Jessie's situation was bleak. Unable to find any food, she was forced to drink water, which she vomited shortly after. That night, she vomited repeatedly, like a fountain. The next day was the crew's medical checkup. When they found Jessie, she was barely alive in bed, vomiting from just moving around and unable to even think about eating or drinking. Seeing her condition, it was clear she needed urgent medical evacuation. After living on muskrat meat and bone soup for 3 days, Carl had to hunt again. Despite many active squirrels in her area, her poor archery skills were evident. One arrow bounced off a blunt head, and another shot up into the sky. The missing arrow took a long time to retrieve. Realizing she wasn't cut out for archery, and with the river frozen, fishing seemed even less likely. Carla decided to rely solely on traps, setting up 5 more wire snares in an area frequented by squirrels. If these failed, she didn't know how she'd survive. Fortunately, as winter began, the usually unproductive traps caught the first squirrel of the season, which Carly planned to stretch into 3 meals. The taste was so delightful she longed for more. Looking back, hunger kept Adam awake all night. A single snowshoe hare barely sufficed for a day's meal. This morning, he dragged his tired body out to hunt again amidst strong winds. The loud wind impaired his ability to hear animals and posed a risk of toppling trees. After walking along the river for over 3 hours, Adam not only failed to find anything but also lost an arrow from his quiver to a tree branch, with no clue where it fell. This hunting trip was a loss in more ways than one. For the first time, Adam found himself missing his family and friends. Despite usually preferring solitude, now he just hoped to survive each day. Juan also had a sleepless night due to the wind. He set 2 tasks for himself today. First, he tied a hanging rope to air out his sleeping bag, preventing the down from clumping and reducing its insulation. Second, he chopped some branches to make his bed thicker and more comfortable. Focusing on sleep, Juan adopted a new plan to fast, planning to drink only a few cups of raw water each day and spend the rest of his time sleeping in the melon shed to minimize energy use. He hoped this would sustain him for about 20 days, by which time he might nearly be the champion. Temujin urgently needed new food to boost his spirits. After wandering a large circle in the woods, he finally saw 2 squirrels chasing each other. Perhaps his poor condition affected his performance. This time, he missed his prey. The long trek drained much energy, and Temujin felt increasingly unable to cope. He began considering trapping as an alternative. Near the river, he hid grouse innards in a pile of rocks, originally intended to attract a bear, but only crows had visited. Temujin used the grouse innards as bait in a bird trap. The principle was simple. When a bird landed on the precarious perch, it would fall, pulling a stone to tighten a noose around the bird's legs. Additionally, Temujin set up several wire snares in the forest targeting squirrels, hoping to maintain food supplies without daily long treks. After his previous failure, Adam ventured further in search of grouse. After an unknown duration, he finally spotted one and easily shot it down with his steady archery skills. Unlike the joy of past successes, this time Adam felt a sadness from within. Throughout the challenge, he had killed many squirrels and grouse. Adam was growing weary of this life. Even with occasional meat, he still lost a pound a day. Relying on small animals couldn't reverse the situation. Only hunting a bear would suffice. Adam's body could no longer support long hunting trips. Climbing slopes was extremely difficult, and he had to stop to rest every few minutes, even on flat ground. Adam knew he needed to survive over 70 days to likely win. He could last 50 days on squirrels and grouse, but with his current weight and physical condition, he didn't know how he would make it through the next 20 days. Not wanting to risk his health to the point where he couldn't work after returning home, Adam quickly chose to withdraw. Temujin, an Asian contestant, had success with his wire traps, catching a squirrel this morning. He subdued it with a homemade throwing stick. Estimating the size of the squirrel, he calculated it provided about 540 calories and 15 grams of fat. This was clearly not enough to maintain his weight, but any food at this point could influence the outcome of the competition. With dropping temperatures, Temujin hurried to repair his shelter to block the wind. He needed to gather many spruce branches. Having lost 44 pounds, Temujin felt his body fat depleting. Tasks that were easy for most people were exhausting for him. He saved a grouse and a lot of reindeer moss for Thanksgiving, hoping it would boost his morale to continue. Carl's shelter was the simplest. Facing harsh winter weather, she planned to make a stove. She found clay nearby and cleared a space with her hands and feet, then gathered dry branches and hay. She bundled them, applied the clay, and assembled the stove and chimney. After lighting the wood inside, the fire would leave a hardened stove. Initially, everything went smoothly, but the thin layer of clay cracked, leaving a large hole. Carla wasted a lot of effort and eventually dismantled the stove. She had previously made a lot of jam, which now came in handy. Unable to get meat, she could at least fill her stomach with jam. Carl set several wire traps in the woods. As heavy snow fell, the traps were buried under thick snow. If not for the colorful ribbons tied to the trees, it would have been difficult to locate them, let alone catch any game. Nevertheless, Carly remained optimistic and refused to give up. Juan was extremely frugal, even dressing inside his sleeping bag to conserve every bit of heat. When he went out to fetch water in the sleet, he didn't want to stay outside any longer than necessary, fearing hypothermia. After collecting water, he quickly returned to his shelter. To prevent the tent fabric from being overwhelmed by snow, he added extra tree sticks for support on top of his shelter. The competition reached day 59. Since deciding to fast and survive on water, Juan was either sleeping or drinking. Today, he finally found something to do and prepared to make an ice pick. After peeling and shaping the selected wood and attaching an axe head, his ice pick was ready. He planned to try ice fishing once the ice thickened a few more centimeters. Carly faced a small turning point. She initially went out to collect pine resin for fire starting but stumbled upon a squirrel moving under a large log. Seizing the rare hunting opportunity, she quickly drew her bow and shot. To her own surprise, she hit the squirrel, her first catch in the challenge. Carly returned and roasted it, chewing by the fire and wishing she could eat squirrel every day. Temujin, armed with a bow and arrows, went hunting again. However, times had changed. Grouse blended into the deeper woods, and squirrels hibernated in their burrows, not venturing out. After wandering for several minutes and seeing nothing, Temujin reluctantly resorted to the last grouse he had saved for Thanksgiving. His body condition didn't allow him to wait any longer. He hoped the meal would provide enough strength and spirit to continue. The grouse, paired with reindeer moss, filled another pot. He greedily enjoyed this last feast, finally feeling full. By day 62, Temujin felt his physical condition worsening. Even walking a few steps exhausted him. Nearby branches suitable for fire were nearly depleted. Chopping wood and returning home had become his physical limit. After pondering all night in his shelter, he decided to use his last resort, packing up and calling the show's producers to withdraw. Temujin felt he had given his all. Walking out on his own was more dignified than being carried out. Now only Carl and Juan remained. This morning, Juan unusually wanted a cup of hot tea. Normally, he drank directly from the icy river, showcasing his remarkably strong stomach. After fetching water from the river, Juan started a fire in the fireplace of his shelter. To his surprise, the can he used as a firebox was an old paint can with leftover paint inside. When heated by the fire, it released a foul, toxic fume. Juan quickly felt headache and nausea. Previously, he had always cooked and boiled water outside the camp, so this problem had remained unnoticed until now. Fortunately, it didn't lead to a serious issue. He carefully knocked the paint can out and replaced it with a clean one, then filled the gaps with some clay. The new fireplace worked just as well. Turning to Carl, she still had some dried fruit pulp in her shelter, which, along with hot spruce tea, could barely replenish some energy. The freshly snowed ground finally showed tracks of white rabbits, which excited Carla but also worried her. She doubted her ability to draw her bow. Sadly, she was so weak that she couldn't pull it, making her helpless even in front of a white hare. Carl struggled not to cry. Normally, one would quit the competition by now, but Carla had a cancer-stricken friend who loved the wilderness. She stayed in the competition not only to win the prize money to fulfill a dream, but also to leave some footage for her friend. Now, she had to rely on her traps. Carly made snow boots out of branches, hoping they would save her energy while checking traps. Juan continued to survive on water each day. Despite previously talking about ice fishing, he hadn't made any moves. On day 75, Carl expressed to the camera that she could no longer find food, and her traps were empty. Her body fat reserves were depleted, and every joint ached. After much thought, she reluctantly made the call to quit the competition. She would regard this experience as a spiritual treasure of her life, as she might never have such a unique opportunity again. Juan became the last man standing. The crew informed him of his victory under the guise of a medical check. Unaware of the real situation, Juan worried about failing the health check and quickly made a fire to boil water, drinking half a pot to temporarily boost his condition. However, the medical check was just a formality. The staff distracted him with conversation while his girlfriend quietly approached from behind to announce his victory. Congratulations to Juan for winning this season's competition.